Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to go over my top 5 tips that I think every single Warwick player needs to know. Now, my goal behind this video is to give you a better understanding of the champion, as well as to make you a better League of Legends player as a whole. I'm going to put timestamps at every single point during the video so you can easily navigate it. They are going to be up top to skip to a particular tip, as well as down below in the scrolling bar is going to be segmented with the different tips. If you want to contact me with any questions, you can hit me up down below in the comments, as well as I'm going to put a pin with a link to my Discord. I'm a little bit limited with this format, only doing 5 tips because I don't want my videos to run too long. Please heavily encourage you guys to include your own tips down below where maybe you can help out a new Warwick player that is just picking up the champion. And with all that out of the way, guys, let's get into tip number 1. All right, and getting into tip number 1, we are going to talk about the most common mistake that a lot of people really make when they are playing Warwick, and it's just the #1 most annoying thing I see when I have an allied Warwick making this mistake. So how you want to use your E in a prime situation is you want to be between the enemy target and the area that they are trying to retreat to when you are ganking or when you are fighting. So you want to make sure that you have a primal Hal in that area, and this is going to make them run counterintuitive to where they want to go. This is going to be the most effective way to do it. Now, sometimes it's pretty hard to get behind the target maybe they have a lot of mobility, maybe it's something like a Riven with a bunch of dashes. The easy way to get a primal Hal on the enemy target is to hold onto your Q, and it will latch you on and put you behind the target, giving you a just perfect situation to get your primal Hal. Now, if you're one of those players that maybe struggles landing ults quite a bit, maybe you're in a situation where the enemy is just really good at dodging and you've missed a couple ults, chaining your fear into your R is going to make sure that you are going to hit every single ultimate if you just need a little bit of an easy mode against a very talented target. So again, it's E, hold the Q to latch, and then while they're feared, you can just use your R afterwards. And this is going to make sure that you are getting off your full combo and you are putting it in a very, very strong situation. However, you need to be careful. You do not want to overlap and use your R when they are still feared. As you see the little white line running out when you are CCing the enemy target, you want to chain those together as fluid as possible so they don't get a fear off, but also not overlapping your CC durations. And that will wrap up tip number 1 for Warwick. Alright, and jumping into tip number 2, we are going to talk about items and builds. Now, it's an extremely flexible champion. I really like Warwick because you can kind of build whatever you want. This is just kind of a for fun build. I was just testing how far I could jump on a target from with my ultimate without using things like Predator or Ghost, maybe in a little bit more of a common situation. So you have 2 choices. When you are laning, you're playing the lane Warwick, maybe you're going the classic barrier build, you want to be using Grasp. It's going to be extremely effective unless you're in a lane matchups. It's very easy and you just want a little bit of extra damage. Press the attack can be effective. However, I really like these runes when I am playing Warwick in the solo lane. However, you do not want to take Grasp when you are playing him out of the jungle. You would want to look for more things like Press the Attack is going to be just a go-to when you are playing Warwick. However, when it comes to just your overall item choices when you're playing Warwick, there are a couple of choices. Now, if there are a lot of enemy tanks and you want a decent amount of damage with a very nice mythic passive being the Divine Sunder, this is going to be a very strong item for Warwick because he does a little bit of magic damage coming out of his R, he does magic damage coming out of his Q, and then also his passive does magic damage. So you're going to get pen for both your autos that are going to be pretty strong based off you getting a few AD items, as well as you are going to be getting pen for the magic damage that's going to be coming out. So the Divine Sunder can be very effective against a very heavy enemy tank team where the percentage HP damage coming out of your Spellblade is going to be very effective. If you're playing against a bunch of people that are looking to kite you out, something like Stridebaker can be very effective. Or if you want to go into more of the tanky aspect, there are other things like Sunfire and Turbo Chem Tank can work very nicely. However, if you are against a lot of bruisers, a lot of enemy melee champions that you do not have to chase down, Gore Drinker can still be very effective. So choose your items according to the enemy team comp, as well as the situation you find yourself in. Do you have a lot of access to gold? Have you snowballed a bit and can afford more damage Warwick-esque items. These are things that you really need to look at before choosing your items when playing Warwick. If you have a team that fully consists of 4 carries, you probably are going to want to focus on being as big of a front line as possible and go more of the tanky options. If you're going against a lot of very, very heavy burst champions that seem to be bursting you out when you do not have your E or R up, you can look at things like a Gargoyle Stone Plate. Isn't really widely used, but can be hyper effective in those types of situations. When you're very strong and you're looking to carry, things with on-hit damage like Titanic or like Wit's End can be very effective because those are procced when you are doing your Infinite Duress on Warwick. If you have any questions about items or builds or just your rune setup, I'd be happy to help you out in the comments down below, and that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and getting into the next tip, we are going to talk about his ultimate and how he can scale with terrain very well. Now, the first thing that you need to understand when you're playing Warwick is you should not let enemies crowd you, particularly targets that you do not want to ultimate. So, as you can see here, I'm pretty close to an enemy target, and I'm going to be ulting in the exact opposite direction of the target, but it is still going to latch onto that very nearby enemy to hit them with a ultimate. This can be very frustrating for Warwicks when you are getting crowded by a bunch of tanks, so keep that in mind when you're playing against them, as well as when you are playing as Warwick. You need to make sure that you are far enough away from the enemy targets, where you can just ultimate to where you want to ultimate and essentially get onto the back line or get away however you are using your ultimate. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with terrain scaling is that you are able to latch onto people over a wall as long as you hold the Q. If you do not hold the Q and just tap it on it, it will go through and register the damage, but you will not be able to get through and get behind them when you are playing Warwick. The next thing is pretty obvious, but when you are getting ganked in the top lane, this is going to be a very good way to get away from people, is just by ultimating over the wall, and using your terrain skill and being able to jump over them can get you out of some very, very sticky situations. So sometimes hovering to the bot side when you are playing Warwick and when you're in a lane, as opposed to getting too close to the bushes and maybe popping in and out of the bushes a bunch, which a lot of people seem to like to do, hovering to this side where you know at least you have an out where you can ultimate over the wall and get out of that situation is going to be just a very effective way to play Warwick. So be aware that he can scale extremely strong with terrain, and be careful with those crowded ultimates. And that will wrap up this tip for Warwick. Alright, and getting into the next tip, the reason why I think Warwick can be very, very effective is because he is not too common of a pick and people don't fully understand his kit. He's a little bit similar to how a Olaf can duel to such an extreme extent and bait people into bad situations with their low HP thresholds. If you did not know, Warwick is a little bit of a stat stick, getting a lot of very nice free stats coming out of his passive, getting a bit of extra magic damage on hit, as well as him being able to heal off that magic damage on hit when he is at lower health thresholds, making him more dangerous when he is at lower health thresholds. Next up, he gets a huge amount of extra attack speed, increasing the amount of healing, increasing the amount of extra magic damage you do from his W Blood Hunt, getting an extra 110 attack speed, but this is obviously at the max rank, being still a really strong steroid of 70% at the level 1, as well as combining with the healing of your Q and your R. You're able to bait people into very, very poor situations that they don't understand that you are still extremely tanky. Let's say an enemy took off about 90% of your HP and they think that you are relatively squishy because you haven't used too much of your extra healing, your Q, you haven't used your R, and they are going to just be sprinting at you, usually in a straight line into lower elos, making it very easy to land your R and getting them into bad situations. So a lot of power comes from baiting out the enemy in these kinds of situations. Now, being able to augment your tankiness with Primal Howl as well as Barrier, increasing the damage you do with Last Stand, this can be a very, very deadly combo to bait people to overextend, and then punishing that overextension when you are playing Warwick can be an extremely viable way to play out the lane because of Warwick's strong sustain as well as strong damage the longer the fights are going on. So keep this in mind when you are playing Warwick. If you're playing against a very passive laner that's not looking to trade with you in the early game, try and get yourself to a lower HP threshold and bait them into trades that you know that you can sustain up, heal, and essentially win. And that will wrap up this tip for Warwick. All right, and getting into the final tip, we're going to go over team fighting. This can be a little bit tricky with Warwick because you need to adjust your playstyle for the current game state. The number one thing that you need to do before getting into the team fight, say a Baron's coming up soon and it is just getting consistently contested and you know some team fights are going to go down, you want to look at what your allied team is like and what your enemy team is like, and if you're going to win a front-to-back team fight. And by that I mean that the tanks engaging in the front line and the back lines damaging the tanks, and the first person to kill the enemy tanks, they start moving in to the back lines. Now Warwick is an extremely effective front-to-back team fight champion. However, he does have some diving mechanics that he can use with his infinite duress. So making sure that you're timing your damage percentage reduction with the enemy's very large burst spells, maybe like a Fizz ultimate or a Zed ultimate that might be going down on you. If you, for some odd reason they're doing that to the tank, you need to be using your Primal House. Something like a Victor Chaos Storm is coming down. This is when you need to pop your damage reduction. This essentially is your lifeline, and poorly timing your Primal Howl is going to be a very quick way to lose a lot of games and just throwing yourself into a very, very poor situation. So if you are going to win a front-to-back team fight, you want to be focused on peeling the frontline enemy champions with both your fear and your ultimate, protecting your backline, and just doing as much damage and sustaining and being that annoying frontline bruiser type of champion that you are meant to be. Next up, if you are in a very strong spot, particularly with a lot of damage, you're snowballing really heavily, but as a lot of us know in solo queue, you can get some really, really shitty teammates. So looking for high value picks can be an extremely effective way to play out the team fights. If you are not going to win a front-to-back team fight with regular situations going on, you need to look for flanks and taking full advantage of your Blood Hunt's extra movement speed as well as your ability to get picks on backline champions. However, you are going to need to get a sweeper as well as a control ward when possible to make sure that you are sitting in a spot with no vision and you can catch the enemy champions unaware. The last thing you'd want is for a front line, maybe a Nautilus support, to just start fading to the back to stop your flank and to just peel you and really stop you from getting on their really squishy backliner. So keep this in mind when you're playing Warwick. What is needed from you? Are you just needed for a front-to-back tank, or are you needed to flank a really high-value enemy target? So keep these in mind when you're playing Warwick. If you have any questions about team fighting, I love talking about just overall tactics when playing this champion. You can hit me up in the comments down below, or you can send me a message on Discord. Be happy to help you out. If you enjoyed the video, guys, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe. And as always, take it easy.